So the next portion of the, I call it the business wheel of life, or we can call it today the leadership wheel of life. If getting clarity is the tire, if spiritual development and personal growth is the hub, the spokes are going to be branding and then product development. It's just being creative and filling the need with a product or service.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Brittany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with leader and entrepreneur Brittany Bruce about how to apply startup business best practices to start up and build momentum within your leadership influence. Brittany Bruce is an educator, podcaster, and founder of Well Done Women, a membership community that equips and trains Christian women to build and launch their businesses and ministries. All right, welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Brittany. I'm so glad to have you.
Yes, I'm super excited. Thank you for having me. This is going to be really fun.
I am so excited for people to get to know you because I have known you almost a year now. We're going on a year. For this women entrepreneur thing that we're doing, Camp for Creatives, how to grow in our business and our leadership and in our ministries. And so I got to say, I have to call you out. That's the shortest bio I've ever had for a person. And I know how awesome you are. I know that you are the mom to 4 beautiful children, which is a full-time job in and of itself. But you are a coach and a mentor to, I feel confident in saying, probably hundreds of people. And I don't know how you do it all. So will you give our listeners just a little bit more about you and just how awesome you are and where you come from with business and leadership?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's hopefully we have enough time, because not that I'm awesome, but I feel like when you hit your mid 30s, you have lived 9 lives. You have gone through a million different careers and paths. And so I grew up as a preacher's kid. So I was in ministry from day one. I knew that I always wanted to teach. So I went straight into education like we were teachers. And so that's my heart. But as I, started becoming an adult, I was looking around to see, oh my gosh, there's so many more options of doing life. And so I was what you would consider the serial entrepreneur. I would see something and be like, oh, I could do that. And then I would do it. I, picked up my camera, which was my very first business that I ever started. It was a photography business because I brought my baby to a newborn session. And he got his pictures taken, and my husband was like, hey, you could do that. And I'm like, you know what? I probably can. And so
hold my baby, watch this.
Right. And so that was my very first business that I ever started. And that led to teaching because, I've always had a heart for teaching photography online. And that turned into coaching, and that turned into courses and membership programs. And that turned into hosting retreats and workshops. And it just kind of spiraled from there. I started Comfy Chic Boutique in a brick and mortar location in my hometown. And it was an online store, and doing all of that. A couple years ago, the Lord told me at the height of all of my success to let it all go.
Oh, wow.
And as a serial entrepreneur, and as something, it's in your bones. Like when you are called to lead, it's in your bones to just create and do and serve. And when you see a need, you fill a need. And, I know most of your listeners are here because they feel called to leadership, or they know that they're called to leadership. And that can be scary. It can be risky. It can be overwhelming. But all it really is seeing a need and filling a need. And that is that's just what I've been doing from childhood till today, is seeing a need, filling a a and so
and
why
you do
is
such
the
a good job
bio?
at it?
Because that wouldn't fit in the little thing that you gave.
I love it. But I'm so glad that you explained it, because everybody needs to know that you have so much experience. And I love the conversation that we're going to have today. We're really walking the parallels between business and leadership. And I think so often we see them as separate of, well, I'm in a leadership position, but I'm not really an entrepreneur. I maybe don't even have my own team, but there's still so many parallels. And so that's why I kind of want to confess why I wanted to have you on the podcast. Number one, you are just awesome and amazing and you're a wonderful teacher. But I want to kind of confess my intent behind this. So I am from the camp that believes that leaders are great because they're creators. And I heard you mention that word, they create. And I
Mhm.
agree with you. They create better products, better services. They create better experiences and environments. They create better relationships and cultures. They create better teams and organizations. Listen to me just going on and on and on. But ultimately, they're creating even better communities.
Yep.
But, and I kind of have a big but here. So I
I
think,
love big
yeah,
butts.
I love the puns. So I can't help but think that a lot of people in leadership positions aren't necessarily skilled in creating. Now, they may be skilled in organizing, they may be skilled in, plug and play systems, they may be skilled in operating the status quo, managing the what is, but they're not always good at creating the what can be.
Hmm.
And I think we've got to teach them how to be better at creating the what can be. And now, I know I just made a generalization. Everybody's like, you're generalized too much. And I'm like, but it's kind of true, at least based upon the experiences I've had. Number one, the organizations I've worked for, the organizations and leaders I've coached. But then the third one is just, well, I'm a consumer of so many, products and services from other organizations. And you just see it everywhere. You see a bunch of managers kind of just keeping the status quo of what is. And it makes me sad because they have such potential to be those leaders that blaze trails, take risks, and move from what is to what can be. And that's where I want you to take us. Again, I see the parallels between business and leadership. And so I really want you to help us. How do we create as leaders? How do we create? Startup businesses have to create something. That's what starts up their business. As leaders, how do we learn to create our leadership so that it actually makes that impact that we're looking for? It builds those positive teams. How to create something that doesn't exist yet? And so that's why I want to have you here because I know that you can help us answer that question. You can teach us how to do this. And so I want you to kind of walk through those business applications, such as clarity, branding, marketing, all those things that we think, oh, that belongs with business. How do we apply it
Hmm.
to grow our leadership legacy?
That's yeah. So I kind of mentioned it in my extended bio, is leadership, if we really boil it down, is seeing a need and filling a need.
Mm-hmm.
Is seeing a need and filling a need. And I think we overcomplicate, especially women, and you probably have a lot of women, female listeners. We overcomplicate, we overanalyze, we overthink, and that we're called to lead, but we are called to
Mm-hmm.
lead, or we know that we want to be a leader in our home, in our work, in our business, whatever, in our ministry. But fill in the blank. I don't have
Yeah.
enough. I can't, whatever. If we boil it down to seeing a need and filling a need, and then creating products, services, plans to solve those problems, your leadership will ultimately succeed. Your business, your ministry will ultimately succeed. If
Mm-hmm.
you look at any successful leader or any successful business or any successful ministry, they got super clear on who they are and who they serve.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what's called branding. Branding is this fancy word that really, when we boil it down and we simplify it, it's not colors and fonts. That's what I think, what we,
Mm-hmm.
go to first thing
Yeah.
is, oh, it must be colors and
McDonald's
branding and
arches. I'm loving it.
logos, right?
Yeah.
And those are good, and those are, the
Mm-hmm.
visual branding, but branding to its core, it is who you are and who you serve. So if we can get super clear on our passions, our strengths, our giftings, our talents that we've received, not we worked for, not,
Mm-hmm.
that, scripture says that we receive these talents and these gifts and these strengths from the time that we were conceived in our mother's womb. We were fearfully and wonderfully made. We were chosen and created. And he gifts us these things. If we can define that, if we can see that, if we can study that, and who we are called to serve. Because leadership isn't barking orders. It's not telling people what
Mm.
to do. Leadership is serving.
Oh,
And
amen.
that gives you a big sigh of relief because you don't like, if I say, hey, I need you to lead this event, that's overwhelming. Hey, I need you to
Hmm.
lead this family, that's heavy. But if I say, hey, I need you to serve at this event or serve your family, you're like, okay, I can do that. I can
Hmm.
serve. And so, what I teach in Well Done Women, my business owners, if you want to really be successful in your business, you need to really define who you are, who God's created you to be, your passions, your giftings, your strengths, and who you serve, because everything that you're going to create inside of your business is going to come from the pain points and the desires of the people you're called to serve.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the secret sauce on how do I know what I create? How do I know what to create? How do I know what organizations, what services, what products I can create or offer the people who need my help? It comes straight
Hmm.
from knowing their deepest desires, what they're needing, what they're wanting, and what they're struggling with and what they're looking for, but they can't find.
Yeah, it's so good. And the whole time you're talking, here's what I'm picturing is I feel like you were encouraging me into what are the talents and gifts that God has given you. And the thing that it made me think of is leaders, we're not cookie cutter. We do not have to be the same. We are not meant to be the same. And I know that on this podcast and so many other places that you go for leadership development, there's like best practices. Yes, there are essential universal best practices, for example, in how to communicate. But whenever you're leading a team, leading an organization, or heck, just leading your family and yourself, you are not going to be skilled at everything that that team needs. So part of being a leader is recognizing your strengths and your constraints and saying, how can I solve this problem? And it may not be you physically solving the problem. You're meant to solve problem A, but maybe problem B, you're meant to be an advocate. You're meant to be the connector of that person to somebody else who can help somebody with that problem. You're meant to, here's one, expand the bottleneck that will help people overcome those obstacles that are making their work so much harder. And I love everything that you're talking about. As leaders, we have got to take time to reflect, ask God, God, who did you make me to be? What skills did you give me? Have him highlight those and step into those priorities in your leadership role, and then build a diverse team to help fill in the gaps for where you have those constraints. That's good leadership. And so branding, get it, girl. I love it. It's so good and we need it.
Yeah, and I love what you said, really, really highlighting the strengths and the talents and the gifts that we already possess. And I think that,
Mhm.
as women, we minimize what we're capable of. Like we really do minimize because, we want to be humble and all the things. But like at the end of the
Mhm.
day, like we're offending God when we, push down the things that He's gifted us. And we
Yes.
minimize the strengths that we possess. I mean, the strengths of being resourceful, the strengths of being frugal, like those are gifts and strengths that we need to utilize in our leadership, and where we are weak and where we aren't as strong and where we
Mhm.
might, like, my brain does not work like my husband's brain. Like my husband, I'm like, the Lord knew what He was doing when He put us together, because I
Mhm.
am the creative, the visionary, the let's go, let's do it. And He's like, hold on, let's make sure we file our taxes right so you don't go to prison. So like,
The logical
I
thinker. Yeah.
yeah, I truly believe that where we aren't as strong, number one, it reminds us to depend on the Lord, and
Mhm.
to know that if He calls us to it, He's going to lead us through it, and He's going to provide what we need when we need it. But also because we are called to be a community of, and the church, we're called to come together to do the Lord's will. We were never meant to do leadership or business or ministry alone. And so we are reminded in our weaknesses that, hey, I can depend on the Lord and know that He's going to provide people to help me fulfill the mission that He's calling me to.
It's so good. And so, you've talked about clarity, you've talked about buy in, just really diving deep into who am I as a leader and who do I serve? What am I about? Because I need to be about it. I love it so much. So, what is kind of the next step that you take business owners through as they're trying to start up their business that we can apply to starting up our leadership? We've talked clarity, we've talked branding, and then what would be next?
The next thing is product development, or what can we offer? What service can we provide? What product can we create? Whenever you are leading your family, okay, you're a
Mhm.
mom, you're at home, and your kids come home from school and they're starving. What do? You feed them, right? So when
Mhm.
you are in ministry, when you are in business, when you are in your workplace and you are serving the organization, the people in it, you need to keep your eyes open as the leader. That's your job, is to see. And that's all throughout scripture. Like the Lord
Mhm.
saw the Israelites in pain and then he provided. Jesus saw the people and then got the disciples together to heal them and cast out demons. I mean, that's the first thing, is to
Mhm.
open our eyes and to see the problems and
Oh, so good.
use our wisdom, our creativity, our giftings, our strengths to solve the problem. Something that, if we're just using family as an example, I love to cook. I would say that is one of my passions. It's a part of my creativity. I don't know. I love to cook. So when my kids are hungry, I'm going to use what I love to do to serve them.
Mhm.
Whereas my husband, he is resourceful, but he does not love to cook. He sees a need. He's going to fulfill the need by ordering pizza. So, same, we are serving the same people. We see the same
Mhm.
need. We are executing the product and the service in two different ways. So, the
And
next portion of I call it the business wheel of life, or we can call it today the leadership wheel of life. If getting clarity is the tire, if spiritual development and personal growth is the hub, the spokes are going to be branding and then product development. It's just
Mhm.
being creative and filling the need with a product or service.
Yeah, I love it. Step two, solving that problem. And you said that so many times. That is what sticking out for me, solving the problem. And as I think of applying this to leadership, how do you notice the problem? Leaders can so often be stuck in meetings, stuck in their email. Oh my gosh, that's a real pain point for
Mhm.
them. But so stuck in tasks where they don't get out and they're not visible and they don't talk to people and get feedback to be able to see the problem. And I know in business that, doing a lot of market research, who is, the people that you're serving, what problems do they have? You got to talk, you got to ask, you're doing polls, you're finding that out. As leaders, we have to do that exact same thing. Be visible, go out and find the people that you're there to serve and get some feedback. What are the pain points? Because you can't solve a problem you don't know exists. And I just
Yes.
love that you're pointing that out because it's so actionable too.
Mhm.
We're there to solve the problem. I love it. And I love your idea of the whole wheel. Guys, visualize that wheel of what we're trying to do. So, will you explain the wheel again and then take us into the next one after developing the product and service?
Okay. So think of a wheel, think of like a tire. The hub is Jesus. The hub is being connected to your faith, to the Lord, that's the hub, spiritual development, personal
Mhm.
development, because if that is not on, nothing is going to work. Nothing is going
Mhm.
to, the wheel will not spin if you don't have the hub. The outside, the tire, is the clarity, the vision, the knowing the knowing where you're going, who you're serving, all the things, the why behind what it is that you're doing. The spokes, we've got one spoke about branding, who you are and who you serve. The next one is product development. The next one is in the business world, what we call marketing. Or if
Mm.
you want to be in the leadership world, it's communicating. It's sharing the product and service that you've created and reminding them that this is going to solve their problems, their struggles.
Mhm.
This is going to fulfill their desires. Because if you build it, they won't come. But if you build it and tell them about it, they will utilize the products and services. They will utilize what you have to offer. I think, and again, if we can just really boil this down to just like everyday life of feeding your kids. I can create the most amazing cookies that they've ever tasted. And but if I don't say, hey guys, I've got cookies, you said you were hungry, you said you wanted a treat. If I don't tell them, they're going to still be complaining about the fact that they're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So the next phase is communicating and being clear in not only what you have, but how it's going to solve the problems and how it's going to fulfill the desires that they have.
That is so good and so true. How often do we, in organizations buy a one size fits all program, or we're going for the magic bullet, the easy button, but then we're like, this is going to solve the problem, but then there's no training on it. We don't tell them how it's going to solve the problem, and all those things, all those initiatives that I'm thinking of. But you are so spot on. Is we have to communicate. We have to explain, here's the problem, here's what we're solving, here's how it's going to be solved through this whatever initiative, new program, whatever it is that you're doing. And communicate it well enough that they buy into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you say, oh, we got another set of cookies here, kids, come on down. I don't like them, and I hate this. I hate this brand. I had to buy off brand today. You're not selling the cookie very well. But if you're like, oh my gosh, I know you're hungry. I am too. Look at these cookies. They look so delicious. Guess what? Before they even take a bite into it, they're like, oh, yeah, that does sound good. How we communicate so matters.
So true. That was so good. I love how we're just going to keep going on with the feeding the kids
That's a real
analogies
life
here.
application.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So, communicated and marketing. Do you have any advice besides just explaining the problem? Are there any tips or tricks inside the communication? Because I really think that that is a huge obstacle for a lot of people. We're just not good communicators. We think a lot of things in our head and we think that we've communicated it, but we haven't. So, how do we get better at the marketing, at getting the buy in?
There's two things that I think, again, there's a million things that we can do, but if I could just share two things. Number
Mm-hmm.
one is using their language and sharing what it is that you're offering them. So again, saying, hey, we're going back to the cookies. Okay. Hey, remember when you said you were hungry? Remember when you said, you've been at school all day and they didn't feed you snacks in the afternoon, like using their own language to tell them about the products and the services that you are selling them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's number one, is using their own words. And again, back to, your question of, how do you know your people? Well, you've got to get on the ground floor and get in the rooms with your people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as leaders, I think it's easy to get stuck in the office and doing the emails and, running the show. If we're not in the same rooms and sitting shoulder to shoulder with our people that we are called to help, you'll never hear the language and the words that they're saying. They will tell you their problems. They'll have no
Mm-hmm.
problem telling you what they want and what they need. We as leaders need to humble ourselves, get in the same room, shoulder to shoulder with them, and listen and write down the words that they're saying. Use those same words to tell them about the products and services you created for them. So that's the first one, is using their own words. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is you've got to be passionate about what you just created. It's got to be in your gut, in your soul. If you don't believe that the thing that you have offered them is going to change their life, they're not going to believe you and they're not going to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so use their language and get really stinking excited about what it is that you're offering them. Because if you're
Oh, that
not, they won't either.
I cannot tell you how many meetings I have sat in where whoever is pitching the next thing that we got to be working on, the project, whatever, and their attitude and their tone is so negative. We got
Mm-hmm.
another mandate. We got another this, another that. And it just immediately deflates the whole room before you ever get into what the thing is in and of itself. And I love that you're bringing that out. So, leaders, I really hope that you're seeing the importance of the marketing, the communicating, the explaining and getting excited for it. And see, I told you that's why we had to have Brittany on this show. She is so knowledgeable about how to start up the business, and it applies to starting up leadership. So it's awesome. All right. Is there anything else with your wheel of business or wheel of leadership?
So the way that I teach my Well Done Women girls is
Mhm.
the last phase is growth, because we don't want to stay where we are. In scripture, it
Mhm.
says to multiply. Faith is multiplication. And so we need to multiply, expand our audience, expand our reach, build more products, right? Get different avenues of marketing, trying different. And so the last spoke is growth. And so that's going to require you to get help. Might
Mm.
be where you need to hire a team member. This is where you're going to might need to outsource some things so that you can stay in your strengths and giftings, so that your family can grow, your income can grow, your audience can grow. And when you put into those practices, you'll be able to uh, have a higher end brand,
Yeah.
have another product. So you're going to go over the wheel again. You're going to have another way that you communicate and market what it is that you just created, the product and service you created. So the last phase is automation and growth. How can we
That's awesome.
simplify? Um, what can we eliminate? Maybe what didn't
Mhm.
work. So it's kind of looking back at all the things that you've implemented and say, hey, that didn't work. Let's never say that again. Hey, this cookie didn't taste right. This was not a good cookie for my kids. They didn't eat it. Let's not waste money and spend. So it's taking everything that you just implemented
Mhm.
and eliminating what didn't work, automating what you can, and delegating everything else.
Man, I love it. And we've talked about those specifically on this podcast before, how we do need to look at elimination, automation, and delegation because it's so,
Yes.
so important. And
Mhm.
another thing, as you were talking, I was thinking about leaders, how our influence grows, right? We scale. And you
Yeah.
mentioned it perfectly. We're adding on the team, or we're getting more complex problems, or maybe we're promoted to a different leadership position. Now we're over a different group or a bigger team. And you got to work through it again, but you've got to know and learn how to be agile, because what skills you have today in your leadership position will not serve you 100% in the next one, because the role will be different. The
Yep.
requests of what you need, the attributes that you need to be successful in that next role will be different. And so you have to be
Yep.
very agile in that and find the new problems and the new
Mhm.
priorities that you have, because now you're serving a different group or you're expanding, you're scaling. So it was just such good advice. Is there anything else that you can think of that we need to know from the business model that you teach that say, hey, this applies to leadership?
Yeah, I mean, if you this is where I always kind of like, okay, let's bring it back in. Um, you need to, if you're, a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ and you want to do what he's called you to do, if you want to, fulfill the purpose that you've had on this earth, the goal of our business, the goal of our leadership, the goal of our ministries is to inevitably hear a well done.
Mm.
And that means that it's not always going to look like financial success. It's not always going to look maybe how you imagine. But whenever we're able to say yes, little small yeses along the way, and we are saying, when we're being obedient to what he's calling us to do in this specific season of life as a leader, as a business owner, as a mom, and
Mhm.
we are doing it for the good of others and for his glory alone, you can expect to hear a well done, good and faithful servant. And when you are faithful over the little, he will put you over much. And that's what he says in his scripture. And here's the best part of all of that. The best part is the last thing that, in that parable of the talents is where I get this Matthew 25. The last part, it says, enter into the joy of your master, which
Mm.
means joy. You will be able to feel fulfillment. You will be able to feel joy and happiness. And at the end of the day, you can have a successful business and not feel any of those things.
So true.
I've firsthand, I think we can all say yes and amen. But if we're able to say yes and be obedient to the small things, the small tasks, being faithful with what he's given us today, we will be able to feel that fulfillment and that joy, because that's what he promises. And so that's what I want to encourage anyone who's listening, is if he's calling you to be a leader and he's calling you to ministry or business, say yes. And he's going to provide everything you need, through people that you need, through programs, through this podcast. And so I know this all can be super overwhelming. But at the end of the day, if we can simplify it to just, you know what, I'm going to be obedient with what he's calling me to today. I'm going to say yes. And every night and every day and every moment you can hear a well done. You were faithful over what I've given you today. You will be able to go every day feeling the joy of your master.
Oh, that's so good. And that right there, everybody, is your key takeaway, right? Give us this day our daily bread, and to be faithful daily into what he's called you to that day. Like, shrink it, make it simple. Yep. It's today. Yep. And I love that. Thank you so much for the wisdom that you've given us, that you've shared. There's so much richness in there. And guys, I just, I encourage you to go look at Brittany's things. She'll talk about it in just a second, but see how you can apply those amazing business practices in your leadership. Number one, everything that she does is so biblical. But business-wise, it's also very helpful because it will grow your leadership. It will help you scale and grow that impact. So it's so, so good. But Brittany, you've given us such amazing advice, but now I want to flip and go the opposite way. What is one poor decision you would tell our leaders to avoid? Like, leaders, don't do this thing because you're better than that.
I think the one thing I would say is stop looking everywhere else.
Ooh.
Stop looking around. Stop looking. Ooh. Stop, like, get off of the Instagram for 5 minutes and get in your prayer closet. He will tell you what he's calling you to. And I mean, that's just advice for your whole life, is just stop looking around. Stop doing what you could do. Like, I can do that. Look what she's doing. I can do that. And start doing what you were created to do. So I will preach on that all day, every day, because I think we all fall short when it comes to just seeing what she's doing and just trying to do the same thing. But that's not, like, God's not calling you to do that. He created you for a new thing, a different thing.
And we have come full circle, because that's kind of how we started, right? You were meant to create. He gave you special gifts and talents to do the thing. Don't worry about the other things. He'll bring people alongside you to help you with those things. Yeah. So focus on what he's given you to do. Such good advice, and we really appreciate it. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your work, and Well Done Women?
Okay. So we just launched a new website, welldonwomen.com. So they can go there. We have so many free resources. We've got an online beginner's guide to online business. We've got a YouTube channel. We have a podcast. We have a blog. We have a Facebook group. We have so many free resources that they can get plugged into and get started right now. Just kind of like taking one day, one step at a time to figure out. We have a clarity in your calling workshop. We have so many things. So if you head over to welldonwomen.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at welldonwomen_.
Nice. Gotta love those underscores with Instagram, all the ways. But guys, don't worry. It'll be in the show notes. I always have the links there. Well, Brittany, you are wonderful. I love how you are loving on and serving other people. You are doing what God created you to do, and we're better for it. So thank you for being obedient in that.
Thank you.
And all right, guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today, we have 2 Bible verses. The first is about our goal, and it comes from Matthew chapter 25, verse 21. Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful in little, I will put you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. The second verse is about our path, and it comes from Luke chapter 9, verse 1. He called his disciples together. He gave them power and authority, and he sent them out. Hey, it's Bethany again. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. If you feel this podcast is helpful, be sure to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers, or anyone who wants to grow in leadership, but also have harmony between their work and home life. Thanks, and I'll see you again in the next episode.